Have you ever stopped to truly look at her? Not the woman the world imagines when it pictures someone living alone. Not the one desperately swiping through apps at midnight or pouring her grief into a glass of wine. I mean the one who is genuinely, quietly, completely at peace. No partner, no boyfriend. And the part that unsettles people the most, she isn't looking for one. When the world encounters her, it immediately reaches for a diagnosis. Whispers travel, she must be lonely. She must be carrying some invisible wound from a love that destroyed her. Or worse, she simply ran out of options. People need to believe she is a casualty of circumstance, because the alternative is far more threatening to everything they've been taught to accept as true. They're wrong. Her life is not a tragedy. It is not a cautionary tale designed to scare other women into settling. It is something far more radical. It is a deliberate, conscious dismantling of every lie we were handed the moment we were old enough to absorb them. From childhood, we are told that a woman is a puzzle piece waiting to find its match, that her value is tethered to someone else, that a house without a man is just an empty shell dressed up as a home. But when a woman chooses to be alone, she is not losing her way in the woods. She is finally stepping out of them. She is reclaiming the full territory of her own existence. This is not a journey that gets rewarded with applause or social media validation. In fact, it is usually greeted with uncomfortable questions and pitying glances at family gatherings. But underneath, that surface runs something few people have the courage to even imagine. A current of silence, of internal strength, of radical self-trust. It takes tremendous courage to stop searching for someone else's approval and start listening, truly listening, to the voice living inside your own chest. There is a widespread misconception that a woman like this must be cold, closed off, broken in some way she refuses to admit, but that is not even close to the truth. She is not cold. She is tired. She is exhausted from years of burning herself down to her foundation just to keep other people warm, while not a single one of them thought to help her carry the wood. She has lived inside partnerships where she carried 100% of the emotional weight and walked away from them drained, invisible, and wondering how she let herself disappear so completely. She has realized something that changes everything. Her energy is not infinite. It is finite and precious and sacred. She has stopped functioning as a public utility and started treating herself as a private sanctuary. She has not lost her capacity for love. She has simply raised the cost of admission to a level that requires genuine effort, real integrity, and actual presence. A woman who does not need a relationship to feel whole is one of the most unsettling forces in the modern world. And that is not an accident. Our entire social architecture is built on the mythology of emotional dependency. The quiet, persistent message that you are incomplete until someone else arrives to finish you. When a woman stands in the middle of her own life and says, without apology, "I am enough exactly as I am," she does not just break that myth. She obliterates the logic of control embedded inside it. She makes it impossible to manage her through loneliness, impossible to manipulate her through fear of abandonment. You cannot control a woman who is not afraid of her own company. You cannot reach someone who is perfectly, deeply content sitting alone in a quiet room with nothing but her own thoughts. Most men are conditioned to seek a woman who needs something from them. Protection, financial security, emotional steadiness. When they encounter a woman who has already provided all of those things for herself, they do not know where to stand. It is a quiet blow to any ego that has been built on being someone's hero. And for other women, her presence can feel equally disorienting. She is a mirror they did not ask to look into. A reflection that asks the question they have been carefully avoiding. Am I in this relationship because I genuinely love this person, or because I am terrified of what I would find if I were finally, completely alone? She does not have to say a single word to challenge the architecture of your life. Her existence alone is the argument. This kind of freedom produces a different kind of wholeness. Not the wholeness of two pieces finding each other, the wholeness of a mountain, immovable, steady, entirely self-contained. She has discovered that the most significant relationship she will ever have is the one unfolding right now in the stillness of her own home, between her heart and her mind. She is not waiting for her real life to begin when the right person walks through the door. She is already living it. And that door is locked from the inside, not to keep the world out, but to make absolutely certain that anyone who enters understands the full weight of what they are stepping into. When you walk into her space, the first thing you notice is not what is there. It is what is not. There is a silence that vibrates at a frequency most people cannot tolerate. The world has taught us to mistake quiet for emptiness. But for her, that silence is not a void. It is a hard-earned sanctuary. Most people are terrified of silence because when the noise of the world finally stops, the noise of the mind grows deafening. So they fill every gap: mediocre company, constant scrolling, conversations that go nowhere but keep the dark at bay, anything to avoid sitting still with themselves. But she has stopped running. She has turned her home into a space where she can breathe without permission, where she does not have to perform or explain herself or spend energy managing someone else's fragile sense of importance. Society has labels for women like her: picky, cold, difficult, intimidating. But those labels are not descriptions. They are projections. When someone sees a woman who is genuinely comfortable in her own presence, it activates their deepest and most carefully buried fear. The fear of being alone with themselves. They cannot fathom why anyone would choose stillness, so they assume she must be keeping the world out through pain. They have it completely backwards. She did not build her inner world as a fortress to shut others out. She built it to finally keep herself in. After years of being slowly invaded by the needs, the chaos, and the unspoken expectations of others, she became the sole gatekeeper of her own peace. She has walked into the rooms most people sprint past their entire lives. The rooms holding childhood wounds and the residue of toxic attachments, and that hollow, desperate habit of begging for the bare minimum of affection and calling it love. Her solitude is not an open wound. It is a scar that has fully, completely healed. To someone emotionally immature, her boundaries read as distance. Her refusal to play modern dating games looks like defeat. In reality, she has simply grown up. And maturity is one of the most terrifying things you can encounter in another person, because it demands truth. It demands presence. It demands that you show up as a real human being and not a curated performance. She is no longer moved by smooth talkers or the kind of romantic energy that looks intoxicating in the early weeks and collapses into nothing by the third month. She has outgrown the mistaken belief that the spark, that electric, anxious, obsessive pull, is the same thing as real love. She now understands it was often just anxiety dressed up in attractive packaging. She is not looking to be saved. She is not interested in becoming someone's renovation project. She has traded the frantic urgency to be paired off for the quiet, anchored power of being with herself. She has seen through the story we are all fed about two halves becoming a whole. She was never half of anything. She is complete. She is looking for something far more rare than chemistry or timing or good looks. She is looking for reciprocity. For a connection built between two people who have already done the painful, unglamorous inner work. Two people who are full, not broken, and choosing each other not out of need but out of genuine overflow. Until she finds that she is not suffering, she is not on hold. She is living her life with a depth and intentionality that most people never access at all. When you look at her, you are not seeing someone who failed to find love. You are seeing someone who refused to manufacture a version of it, just to avoid being alone. Most people spend their entire lives following a script written for them by society, religion, family, or culture, checking boxes and calling it happiness. She has opted out of that performance entirely. She is living proof of the one thing we are most aggressively told is impossible: that a person can be genuinely, profoundly happy without a witness. Her joy is not a performance for an audience. It is a private, uninterrupted conversation between her and her own soul. When someone looks at her and says, "You're just too picky," she does not get defensive. She smiles, because she understands a secret they have not yet discovered. What the world calls picky is simply the bare minimum of what she deserves. She has stopped negotiating for honesty, for consistency, for basic human respect. She has decided that if those things are not already on the table, she is not pulling up a chair. And her clarity does not just protect her. It acts as an involuntary mirror for everyone around her. Men who feed on female insecurity find their tools useless in her presence. Women still caught in cycles of approval-seeking feel a sharp, uncomfortable pang, not because she is judging them, but because her freedom makes their own limitations impossible to ignore. She is not trying to make a statement. She is not staging a revolution. She is simply existing. But in a world that has spent centuries demanding women remain small, agreeable, and perpetually available, the act of simply existing in your full power is more radical than any protest. She has stopped living to please, to shrink, to perform. She lives to inhabit herself as completely as possible, and that makes her the most dangerous kind of person alive. Someone who is truly, unconditionally free. This freedom has reshaped everything she understands about love. Every day she remains single is not a gap in her story. It is a conscious, considered choice. And every time she says no to a connection that falls short of what she knows she deserves, she is performing an act of profound self-respect. She has arrived at a realization that cannot be unfelt. It is infinitely better to be alone than to be invisible inside a relationship. She has lived in those rooms before. The ones where you are sitting beside someone and still feeling unreachable, unseen, unheard. She has no interest in returning to the loneliness of being lonely together. Her path is not perfect. There are nights heavy with nostalgia for a particular kind of warmth, moments when the silence carries weight instead of peace. But even in those moments, she remains loyal to herself. She will not trade her hard-won wholeness for the temporary comfort of a body in the room just to say she isn't alone. The love she remains open to is not salvation. She does not need to be rescued from her own life because she genuinely, wholeheartedly loves the life she has built. She is not looking for someone to fill a vacancy or repair something broken inside her. When love finally arrives, it will not feel like finding a missing piece. It will feel like a celebration. Two whole, complete, self-aware people looking at each other and deciding, freely and without desperation, that life is even more extraordinary when it is shared. That love will not come to complete her. It will come to join her. There is a profound difference between leaning on a crutch just to keep moving and meeting someone who can genuinely match your pace. She is waiting for an equal, someone who has done the same difficult, unglamorous work of becoming themselves. Someone who understands that love is not about possession or rescue. It is about expansion. And now this becomes about you, because this is not just the story of a distant, unknowable woman. This is a mirror aimed directly at the strength that is already living inside you, quiet and waiting and tired of being ignored. If these words are landing somewhere deep in your chest, it is because you are exhausted. Exhausted from making yourself smaller to fit into spaces that were never built for all of who you are. Exhausted from playing a character in your own story, just to hold onto a version of peace that isn't really peace at all. And some part of you, the part that has been listening this entire time, is finally demanding something real. Do not let this be just another thing you consumed and moved past. If you are ready for a love that does not ask you to lose yourself in the process, the first step is not finding the right person. The first step is reclaiming your own space. It is falling in love with your own silence. It is setting a standard so grounded and so clear that only the most genuine, self-possessed presence could ever rise to meet it. Share this with a woman who needs to be reminded. Her power is not in who she can attract. It is in who she becomes when she finally stops trying to be anyone but herself. It is time to rewrite the story. Wholeness is not something you arrive at with another person. It is the home you build inside yourself.